Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about entrapment law. It's something that you see in all ideological societies. You don't really see it so much in societies where the rule of law applies, but where ideological law applies, then entrapment type laws, they're sort of like tripwires, if you like. Entrapment type laws are fairly widespread, and I'll use an example of the Soviet Union, the old Russian communist state that was the biggest, most militaristic communist state of its day, from 1917 to sort of 1989, 90. So given their view is that they were changing society ideologically, and in any ideological society, they have to try and make sure that everybody thinks and has thoughts, believes in exactly the same thing and in the same way, because it's ideological. There's nothing practical. There's no market forces that are driving anything. It's purely ideological, and so you have to believe that 2 and 2 are 5. You have to believe that from an ideological perspective, 2 plus 2 could equal any number ideologically. In a rational sense, 2 plus 2 has to equal 4, but ideologically it can actually equal any number. And so this is where ideology sort of comes unstuck, that people go, well, that can't be right. Now, those sort of people are what the communists would view, or any ideological government or position. They view them as a problem. They're a potential problem. Now, when people are overtly against the state, they're not that hard to find. But what the ideological warriors were always concerned about, what about people that potentially could be against the ideology? Because the ideology is the state. If the ideology is gone, the state can't exist. The ideology is their power. It's the source of their power. It's the source of their control. Just like the globalists today, the globalists are attempting to impose an ideological state of living on us all, but without our consent, without our agreement, without us voting for it. And that's why the globalists are so hell-bent on going after what they call the white supremacists, Hitler, because that is, in their cognizance, the potential biggest threat to their ideologically, they're imposing their system, their ideological system on us. So now the communists, the Soviet communists, when they conquered Eastern Europe and they took over, they would hold town hall meetings and say, well, let's all together in town hall. What sort of government do you people want? Let's have a town hall. You get up and you have your say, because we're your friends. We are your friends. We are here to listen. We are here to help. And political commissars and goons and everything would be there. And so in come the local population of Eastern Europe after the Soviets have moved in, and people go and say, well, I think we should have a democracy. I think we should have this. And what about we have, such and such and so and so. So there were two things that the Soviet commissars were looking for. People who may have ideas that were contrary to the ideology, the communist Marxist ideology of the Soviet Union. That was one. And number two, people who were capable of analyzing, the unusually high powers of analysis. They were dangerous. Not that they've done anything wrong, or they may necessarily be against the ideology, but given the ideology contradicted logic, then anyone with substantial or above average powers of analysis would work out this is bullshit, and therefore it's a threat. Therefore they would be a threat, because they have the capacity to reason and to think through the issues and decide that, hey, this communism doesn't work. And people capable of that level of reasoning, higher levels of reasoning, are also then capable of convincing others to also, not believe the ideology blindly. So they had to get rid of both of those sort of people that did disagree or wanted different forms of government, and the people with those. So they used these town hall meetings to flush people out So it was a form. It wasn't a town hall meeting at all. It was just a big entrapment device. So they could flush out people and get them to make an utterance that was ill-advised under the circumstances. Then they could just arrest them for counter-revolutionary activity or anything. They could just invent a crime. They didn't need to go through any sort of legal process. They could just invent a crime. And now the Soviets were very concerned about people that might start to think the wrong way, not were or did, but might. So they would start to profile people who, this is in the Soviet Union, start to profile people who are most likely to cause or potentially cause problems against remember, the ideology is what's sacrosanct here. The ideology that we have in the West, for example, of transgenderism, it's an ideology, and it's used as a device to maintain and implement and enforce social control. So if you argue against the ideology, which is irrelevant in itself, if you argue against the trans ideology, you are arguing against globalist power. That is the simple arrangement. You are arguing against globalist power, and they will not accept that. You're a fucking Nazi if you don't agree with the globalist ideological program. So the Soviets were the same. So they would leave. They would have all sorts of books in the libraries, Shakespeare, that sort of thing. But if you got a book out on Shakespeare, that would be, if you want to read Shakespeare, it must mean you have sympathy with Western bourgeois attitudes, which are inconsistent with Marxist communism. So by getting out a book by Shakespeare, then you are condoning bourgeois views, and that means you're against the Soviet Marxist system. And if you're against the system, then it means that you are going to be a counter-revolutionary and a fascist and an enemy of the people, and we have to put you in prison or kill you. So they had these the books weren't there for people to read. They were there as a device of entrapment. Now, it also went in other areas, which we see today in the United States and Britain, where there's if they find a group of people they think may be susceptible to as they would term it, against the ideology of the communist Marxist system, they would then send agents in to agitate and stir these people up. Let's go and do this, or let's go and do a protest, or let's print some pamphlets underground and pass them around to people to say that communism is bad, or these sorts of things. So what they'd send these agents in and say to people, look, I've got a printing press, I can do it for you, says the KGB, communist agent. And go, oh, okay, all right, yeah, all right then. Don't worry about the paper, I've got the paper. I've got the printing press. I've got this friend who can distribute it. No, it's okay. So really, all the means and the logistical machinery to do this in the Soviet Union, this law breaking thing to act against the ideology, the communist ideology, it was all facilitated by the KGB. Would these people ever have done it if those resources hadn't been made available? Probably not. I mean, so where are they going to get the printing presses from? How are they going to do that? So the argument, however, wasn't that they only did it because we gave them the means to do it. That wasn't the argument they used. Well, these people are predisposed against the ideology. The fact that they would even have the slightest contemplation, because they would think for even a minute that the ideology is no good, means that the communist ideology is no good, means that these are counter-revolutionary, evil, fascist Nazis, and we have to imprison them or kill them. So they'd be constantly trying to flush people out through that. Now, this is something that the Soviets were, or any communist society really, they were constantly doing. The Stasi in East Germany were always doing these sorts of things. And also there was things like, the honey traps, where they would send, the hot babe in to have intimate relations with somebody they were targeting. Then that would all be photographed, and then they would use that as a way of compromising them, extorting, blackmailing them, and that sort of thing. But now let's jump to modern day the West, where in England, as an example, fathers were being very badly treated in the divorce courts, which is all part of the globalist project to destroy the family and all that sort of thing. And these men were quite legitimately complaining about it, but they'd made a little aside. They had like an activist group. So you'd think that wouldn't be any big deal. Like, who cares? So why not address their concerns? They've all been talking to their local politicians and this sort of thing. Nothing much is happening, of course. So they send the government, the security services send secret agents in to infiltrate these fathers that are concerned about how badly they're being treated in the divorce courts. What? You're sending secret service agents to infiltrate these people without a threat or a danger to anybody? What are you doing, for Christ's sakes? But this was to start. Why not listen to these people, listen to their concerns? But no, ideologically, we have to destroy the fucking family. It is part of the globalist project. So if these men are complaining about being badly treated in the court, then they're fighting back against the ideology, and we will not accept that from those damn fascist Nazis. So this is the mentality here, that we're implementing a new ideology to create a new world, and these fucking morons are concerned about the law and evidence and the rule of law and due legal process and seeing their kids and everything. Those fucking fascists. We're going to bring them down. So they send secret agents in amongst these guys, and then the secret agent says, it would be what about these politicians? Wonder how they'd feel, if they didn't have any contact with their kids. How would the Prime Minister feel if his kid was abducted by the family court? Abducted, that's it. These guys are plotting, these fucking fascist Nazis are plotting to overthrow the government, to kidnap the children of all the politicians of the Prime Minister. The fucking Nazis. We got to get them here in prison for those motherfuckers. So this is straight away that's you. So this is infiltrating and then using entrapment suggestions of why don't we do this? And you look at other things where, say there's a group of protesters outside of, maybe it's a government building. Remember, the government reports to the people in the West, or they did once. And so someone comes up and goes, hey, guess what? I found a door that's open around the back. We can get inside the building and we can tell these politicians what we think. We can go in there and really do. I know where that door is. Hey, follow me. And we can go inside here and really, we can make a difference, and so on and so forth. Now, when the Supreme Court hearings were going on and leftist Antifa BLM mobs were going in and beating on the door and howling like banshees and roaming around the corridors of the Senate, that's of course all fine. If someone lets them in and everything, that's not a problem. But if you're pushing back against the globalist ideology, then it is a problem. And you are threatening their power. And if you threaten their power, they will come after you, as Merrick Garland is doing in the United States right now. So the agitator says, well, we've got, I know this open door. The door's always closed. This is a preset entrapment gig where that door's been especially open just so these protesters will go in, just so the media can catch them in the act. And they go, look, insurrectionists, they're trying to overthrow the government. That's it. They're Nazis. Hitler was seen among them, and so on. So that's now that person that opened the door and made sure the door was open, led them around it. They didn't know the door was there, led them around it. That person vanishes off into nobody wants to know them. Maybe they were caught in camera, but no one really cares. That doesn't matter. We're after the insurrectionists. They're the evil ones, the damn Nazis. So this idea of entrapment and looking at the Gretchen Whitmer case, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, where the FBI actually gave all the resources to these people to actually do it and egged them on and encouraged them and pointed them in the direction. And yet, we see this sort of thing now is certainly, as far as I can tell, this is how it's going to happen. Because none of these people are actually a threat to law and order, but they are a threat to the ideology, and that will not be tolerated in this day and age. And the full force of the the state apparatus, the police and Justice Department, courts, and so on, the full force of that state-funded apparatus will be used against anyone who opposes the globalist ideology. And that's really the issue here. And because crimes against ideology can't be codified, they have to create and invent entrapment issues to get these people, and then to threaten and intimidate people and so on. Even if they're unsuccessful in getting them, throwing them in prison or something like that, they're still, the process alone is torturous, and people are, their mental health suffers under such a constant strain of endless court hearings and threats, and federal agents in body armor arriving with drawn guns and all sorts of things like that. It takes a very, very tough dude or tough person to withstand the constant harassment that the state and all their apparatus, which of course is all part of something on the payroll, that they've got all these people just sitting there. Whereas as soon as you stop what you're doing to fight them, your income dries up, and then all your savings get used up in fighting back against it. For them, though, it's just another taxpayer dollar they can burn. They don't care. You're the one as the citizen who suffers, even though you've committed no crime other than disagreeing ideologically with what the globalist controlled governments of the West want to do. Now, also the second sort of side of this, I've made a good look at had a good look at the amount of climate change people that disrupt traffic. These silly little girls that don't know what day it is that are doing this climate change activism, and how they always get, assuming they're arrested at all, if the police say move on and they don't, you look how roughly the people that didn't move on from the COVID demonstrations, the police were pulling out truncheons, using rubber bullets. Those people were very roughly handled. Then look how gently the climate change protesters are treated. Very gently. There's no pulling of truncheons with them, even though they're refusing to accept police directions to move on. That sort of thing. They're handled with the kiddest of kid gloves, and bailed within seconds of getting inside the jail at the police station. So, and yet, when these people end up going to court, again, assuming the police even make an arrest, when they end up going to court, it's incredible how often they manage to get an activist judge who is like a super climate change sympathizer, and lets these people off without a fine, without any charge recorded or anything like that. I've seen people in court that have had a charge recorded over $100 fine, or disputed $100 bill or $100 debt, and yet these people can create mass havoc in the city centre, causing traffic to be snailed up for many hours, and all sorts of things going. People trying to get to hospital that can't in ambulances, and yet these people get let off with if it's even a slap on the wrist. Now let's look at reverse the same thing. Someone who misgenders or doesn't properly use the gender pronoun of a transgender person, they can have several police at their door within minutes. Or a woman calls up and says, my boyfriend's being violent to me. Police cars with sirens will come screaming along. But for that, without any knowledge if the accusation or the claim is true. And yet, when that goes to court, the guy invariably is screaming. A woman walks into a police station. I want to take out an apprehended violence order against some guy. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure. So that guy is now, his movements are restricted by law under threat of arrest and imprisonment, and he doesn't even know. I mean, has there been any verification of it? Has there been any evidence? Has there been nothing? Nothing. It's just done. So we're looking at anything that supports the ideology, creating social division. We're only doing it to protect women and children. Create social division. We're only doing it to protect transgenders. We're only doing it for equality. Anything that opposes the ideology is brutally moved against. Whereas anything that supports the ideology, such as climate change disruptions in a city, that's accepted, and there's very few, if any, penalties meted out for that. Similarly, it's amazing how these people who say the January 6th thing, how successfully the government was able to find judges who were super anti-Trump and super anti all. How do you find that many activists that are going to just do your bidding? You can just quietly say, we want this guy put in prison. We want that guy kept in prison without charge. No, we want that climate activist released without charge. How do you get that many activist judges? It goes to show you just how many ideological judges there are now, all across the Western world, not just in the United States, but in Australia and Britain and so on. So I think we've got into a new era of law, and I'd call it entrapment law, neo-entrapment law, where everything is now measured to the potential threat to the ideology. That the globalist ideology is the source of their power. Their ability to accuse you of being a white supremacist, fascist, Nazi, and to do so with utter impunity, that is part of their ideological power structure. And if you fight back against that, then you are threatening their power, and that's why they will come after you so viciously. If you break the law or murder someone or rob the bank, who cares? It's not a big deal anymore. Ideological law is now the issue. And in order to flush out the people who they believe, straight white males, who they believe are the biggest threat to the ideology of globalization, then they're constantly going to be using all sorts of entrapment. Any organization you start to fight globalization will be infiltrated by the Secret Service on the day you start it, and they will do everything they can to organize a situation of entrapment so they can arrest you or imprison you, discredit you, publicly shame you, and so on. Remember, they own pretty much the entire media establishment, so it's not hard for them to come after you legally, and of course through the media. You look at that Kyle Rittenhouse and that Nick, what's his face, the Catholic high school kid. That Indian activist guy got right in his face, but the media portrayed it the other way around. This sort of thing. And of course, the Catholic Church, just on its own, is a threat to the globalist ideology. The Christian Church is a threat to the globalist ideology, which they always have to take a swipe at it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.